Welcome to Research Craft, a series about how historians at all levels go about doing history and what we can learn from each other. I'm Robert Carl. How to organize one's archival documents and other primary sources is a perennial question for anyone studying the past. This mini-episode demos a sample workflow for tagging and organizing digitized archival documents using Tropy, a free open-source program from the makers of Zotero. This is part of a longer episode featuring Dr. Jessica Mack, who worked on Tropy outreach at George Mason University from 2020 to 2022. This tutorial also does a side-by-side comparison of Tropy and DevonThink, the research management program that is the subject of Research Craft number 6. This episode also draws on best practices that I lay out in an earlier series of research methods videos. You needn't have viewed any of those other videos to follow the tutorial, but I recommend them for a more detailed discussion if you're interested. We'll return in a moment to this established Tropy project, but for now, let's go ahead and open a new project up under the File menu. Title that Sample. Now, one important thing with Tropy is it will often default to saving things in the Documents folder, which we don't want to do here. Normally I wouldn't save research materials like this in the Downloads folder, but let's go ahead and do that for simplicity's sake. So select Downloads, go ahead and save the new project. Here too, I've put some research materials in the Downloads folder where I wouldn't normally put them. I'm going to put in some sample images from my current book project. These are from the AGN, the Archivo General de la Nación in Colombia, in Bogotá, that are prison bureau files from Gorgona, which was Colombia's main island prison from the 1960s to the 1980s, sort of Colombia's tropical Alcatraz. I often advocate for minimal processing of archival images as we take the photographs, but you can see here that I've used Apple Automator to sequentially rename all of the items from this folder. So agn.impact.gorgona.45.137, that's my way of telling which collection, subcollection, box, and folder it came from. This has advantages later on as we get to organizing some of our metadata in spreadsheets, which I'll get to in a moment. I tend to do it only for smaller collections. It's a newer practice, has advantages and disadvantages, but I did want to note it here. I'm going to go ahead and select these roughly 40 files and drag them into Tropy where you'll see them beginning to upload. Again, these aren't making a copy, it's just making an image within the Tropy project. So we'll wait until those are done processing. One feature of Tropy that I really recommend using if you're importing files from a lot of different archives at the same time is this last import button. So go ahead and select that, select all of my files. Apps like Tropy don't have an option to show you files that you haven't yet read. So one thing I recommend, a practice I'm starting to get into myself, is just to label everything at the beginning as unread, and then later on as I go through them I can uncheck that. It's much easier to go ahead and add a tag like that at the beginning of a project than to go back and do it later on once we've already begun to read things. I'm also going to go ahead and create a tag with the AGN with the name of the archive, again just for the sake mostly of redundancy. I'm going to zoom in a little bit then and see my documents up close. Also going to go ahead and begin to combine multi-page documents into a single item within Tropy. You see there images 6 through 8. I'm going to control click on that and go down to merge selected items. So those photos are now one item within Tropy. Much of the rest of this folder is also just one long document. So I'm going to go ahead and merge together files 13 through 36. You'll note the last photograph of my hand in front of an archival document. As I explained in my earlier research methods video, this is a practice I follow to make it easier to distinguish when I'm done with a folder or a box by just looking at the thumbnail. So I take a picture of my hand or a brightly colored piece of paper. When I reach the end of a folder, I'll take 2 photos when I reach the end of a box, and it's just a nice way, again, a redundancy to help the process of organizing our research materials once we're done with the archive for the day. I'm not going to process a lot of the documents for this example. Instead, I'll just zoom in on this one and show you some of the image manipulation functions, image viewing functions that Jessica talks about in the rest of the interview. And then I'll just go ahead and add the date for this one document as a sample. With that basic overview of how to import documents into Tropy and begin to process them out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and open up a more complete Tropy project that includes these same Gorgona documents. As you can see, I've added dates to several more of the documents. I've also taken notes on several of these documents. In particular, let's go ahead and look at the one ending in 013, that longest single document within the folder. As you can see, it's assigned individual notes files to individual pages within the single item. One more thing I want to highlight here is that although Tropy is very good about attaching metadata, that is information about the document, to the individual image, it's still invaluable to do what I've done here, which is to put in an abbreviation to the document. So the collection number, the box number, the folder number, and also the image number. Because if I were to paste this line of notes without the metadata into a chapter outline or into a chapter draft, it risks getting separated. I risk wasting time going back and looking for the citation. So this is yet another level of redundancy within the workflow. I'll now cover some of the same steps using a second set of documents within this Tropy project. These are U.S. State Department files from the National Archives and Records Administration, or NARA. I'll click the NARA tag I've created and go on to a combined item into which I've pasted some of my old notes. The notes are in fact so old that I hadn't yet ironed out my note-taking practices, so the metadata aren't as complete as I'd like them. There's no reference to a specific image, and the folder isn't clearly labeled as a folder. So I'll go ahead and add those details now. This example is also illustrative because I moved the original image files or changed the name of the folder they're located in on my hard drive. Jessica didn't demonstrate this earlier in the episode, so let's take a look at Consolidate Photo, which will reestablish that link between this item in Tropy and the original photograph. For whatever reason, I have to select Consolidate Photo again with a different image in order to get this window, which will reestablish the file pathways for all the other photos in this folder. We can see then that it's restored access to all of these original images. Also, if we zoom back out from the image, you can see it processing those other photos in the background. I want to move on now to test Tropy's search feature. I'll type in Gorgona, which turns out to be a bad example because of how I titled the image files in the first place. Do eventually find Gorgona in this notes file. I don't demonstrate it here, but Tropy's search will return results on tags or on dates you've added to items. Let's pick a better example, the surname of the subject of this prison file. Sure enough, this search turns up the two documents to which I'd added notes with his name. Let's take this opportunity to process a couple of images as if we'd finished taking notes on them. As I talk about in my research methods series, color coding is a central practice across different kinds of data management. I'll cover another application later on in this demo, but for now, let me tag this image as yellow, the color that indicates to me that I've finished reading something and there are notes or annotations to go along with it. I'll also add the color yellow to the label as a helpful visual cue. I'll also tag the first image in this folder, which is just a picture of the physical folder from the archive, as orange, which is the color that indicates that I read through a document and it wasn't useful. I hadn't tagged this batch of files with an unread tag, but if I had, we could also unselect it for these items. With tagging out of the way, let's explore templates, which Jessica went over in the first part of the full episode. You can see here that I've customized a template for the files from NARA so that it includes fields for the author and recipient of each document. The original template had the document type default set to correspondence, which I didn't bother to change but easily could have omitted when I created the new NARA template. I want to create a new template for the Colombian documents in this project. To do that, I'll go up to Preferences and select the Templates tab. I'll click here to copy the NARA template, alter the name to AGN, and click Create. I can then change the default archive name. I'll also go down to Collection and set the default as inpec.gorgona. Obviously, I could create a unique template for each collection I use at the AGN. I'm also making a choice here to lump two classifications into this one field. INPEC and Gorgona are the collection and subcollection. Actually, if we were requesting the original documents at the AGN, there would be another level of classification above these that I'm omitting here. But I don't need the level of detail of putting INPEC and Gorgona as separate fields. It's really a larger question here of who we are organizing and indexing our materials for. If I were working at an institution or perhaps sharing documents with a collaborator, I'd need to be more granular. But that need isn't there there if I'm just working for myself. Now that I've finalized that template, let's go ahead and apply it to the relevant documents. With all those templates in place and our metadata fields populated, let's explore how we can begin to move our metadata out of Tropy. This is a relatively new feature in Tropy, one which I think helps bridge from individual documents to thinking about project management as a whole. We'll begin by installing the CSV plugin, which will allow Tropy to import and, more importantly here, export all of the item metadata to a spreadsheet. For those of you unfamiliar with it, CSV is a basic non-proprietary spreadsheet file format. I've most commonly come across it while making maps with GIS software. I'll go to the Tropy website and from there to the corresponding GitHub page, where I'll download this zip file. Tropy also installs plugins through Preferences. We don't need to decompress the zip file, though I will have to resize these windows to hit the open option. We then enable the plugin. I'll call this instance CSV for simplicity, though as you can see, I could create spreadsheets that are structured in line with my various metadata templates. You can leave the Save Export As option blank, but it helps to put in something generic. I'll have the export default once again be in my Downloads folder, because if I didn't set this, I'd have to select a destination every time I export. It's also important to specify that I want this to be a CSV file. I don't need to click on anything else. The plugin is enabled and ready to go. We now see under the File menu options to import metadata as CSV or export it. I've already selected all of the Colombian documents in this project, so we'll go ahead and select Export. Because I'm simply demoing this process, I'll just close the warning to save the spreadsheet in a native Excel format. You can see that Tropy has generated spreadsheet column headings with syntax that it can read. We'd have to leave these intact if we wanted to import metadata spreadsheets into Tropy. These column headings might also differ from the metadata category titles that we expect to see. For example, let's hop back into Tropy to look at a metadata template. You can see here that Tropy's default, the one it knows to read, is creator, whereas the category shows up to us in Tropy as author. This is a minor point, but a helpful one to understand how Tropy handles data. Let's quickly review the other features that Tropy's generated in this spreadsheet. We've got all of the metadata fields, even the ones where we haven't entered information. If you've ever exported a Zotero library into a spreadsheet, this is similar to that. Seeing this might prompt us to prune our Tropy templates in the future to just the metadata categories that we know we're going to use. Column M has the tags I've applied to various items. In column O, we come across a seeming problem. The accent and diacritical marks haven't been properly rendered. This is an issue with the CSV file's limited functionality, rather than anything with Tropy specifically. If we were to open the CSV file in Google Sheets, the accent marks would appear. One other limitation is related to the fact that Tropy generates a separate note for each image within a merged item. That's reflected here. Each notes entry in that longest document I created appears in a separate spreadsheet column. This suggests that trying to export notes from Tropy isn't currently workable. So let's instead convert this CSV output into a spreadsheet we can use to track our progress. If you've watched my other methods videos, you know I'm a big advocate for creating spreadsheets to record which files I've consulted and photographed in an archive, or to record my reading of digitized versions of those documents later on. The first thing we can do with the Tropy metadata is to figure out how long each item is. I'll insert a new column B, into which I'll copy-paste column A. I'll then do a find and replace to remove all of the file names except for the numbers at the end of each entry. I'll do that twice, once for the documents from the AGN, and then again with the documents from NARA that I hadn't originally retitled. With that done, I'll insert another new column and put in a simple formula that subtracts the value in the row above from one of my values in column B. For example, that longest Columbian document we examined is 24 pages. I'll copy-paste that formula into the rest of column B, manually changing the values where we transition from one archival collection to the next. We know that the last item, for instance, from the AGN isn't 1,357 pages long. The longest documents in an archive aren't always the most valuable, but calculating page length could be useful for identifying where to focus my reading. For instance, I could easily sort the sheet by column B, placing the longest documents at top, or I could apply conditional formatting, which would assign different colors to different page lengths, which in turn would help draw my attention to potential starting points. For now though, I'll wrap this up by copying column B and choosing paste special values, which will keep my page range calculation irrespective of what I do with the columns the formula originally relied on. Deleting column C will clean up my sheet, after which I'll give a title to column B and begin renaming a few other existing columns. There are other changes I'd make to this spreadsheet to track my progress, which I'll get to in a moment. Let's say I was ready to start writing and wanted to make a central list of the archival documents I'm actually referencing. This is always something I've tracked in spreadsheets, but having Tropy's metadata here adds a way to do it more systematically. I'll insert a new column M, which I'll call citation. I'll enter a formula to combine the archive, collection, and subcollection data into a single cell. To do this, I'll hit the equal sign to begin the formula, click on the first cell, AGN, and then put in an ampersand, which combines the cells. My personal practice is to separate the archive, collection, box number, and so on with a period in between each value. To do that here, I'll put in a period between quotation marks, which tells Excel to treat the period as a unit of text rather than as a step in the formula. I'll follow that with another ampersand and repeat until I have all of the columns I want. The NARA document I filled out metadata for offers a chance to deepen this even further by adding citation information for the document itself alongside its archival location. I'll first paste in my formula from above, then go about adding information from the other columns. This will take a moment. Hopefully watching me go through the steps will help familiarize you with the process. Rather than separating each row's values with a period, I'll put a comma and a space in between the quotation marks. There's the output. It looks as though Excel had trouble reading the date. I don't show it here, but this is another example of where opening the CSV in Google Sheets is better. If I were to format the date cell as text in Google Sheets, my combined cell would list the correct date. This doesn't work in Excel. Making this video has thus helped me grasp Tropy's potential. If I've already put in the work of entering metadata for my documents in Tropy, exporting to CSV allows me to copy and paste a formula to generate primary source citation information at scale, rather than constructing each citation from scratch, as my personal practice has worked previously. Let's take a few more steps. If I were using the spreadsheet to track what I'd read, I would color code rows as an alternative to what I did with the tags in Tropy itself. I'd add a date read column for redundancy. I could also add a notes column, not to take all of my notes, but to jot down thoughts as I move through the documents. I can also add a column to use as I'm citing individual documents, a way to track which chapter of a longer work the document appears in. For example, dissertation chapter 1 or book chapter 4. I can also add a column for shortened citation information if I'm citing a document multiple times in a work and don't need the full citation each time. There are other ways to go about making a sheet like this. Let's paste our column titles into a new tab and then hop over to the folder where the original files are located. Here's another advantage to having changed the file names to include all of the archival location metadata. I can simply select all the items in that Finder folder, copy and paste them into a spreadsheet, and then go about building my spreadsheet from there. This is how I've done research management previously. It's simpler in some ways, but there's something to be said for merging images in Tropy rather than selecting Excel rows to delete as I'm showing here. The interface is a lot easier, and with the CSV export plugin, I can get to that spreadsheet with minimal extra work. Very quickly, I want to show you two other options in Tropy. The first is another plugin, Archive, which allows you to export metadata, notes, and the original images. The output is a JSON file and the constituent image files, in my case JPEGs, which are not the most convenient combination. Instead, I'll show you the export PDF function. As you'll see, we end up with my fully merged document, complete with metadata and notes for each page. As Jessica described in the first part of the full episode, this could be great for teaching. I'll conclude this demo by comparing some of Tropy's functionalities with those of DevonThink, the database program I've used for note-taking for the better part of 2 decades. I'll first create a group, DevonThink's version of a folder called Gorgona. Rather than importing the related files into DevonThink, which would create a duplicate of the original images, I'll index the files, which is essentially what Tropy does. With those files in DevonThink, I'll give them archive and collection tags. One advantage that DevonThink has over Tropy is that it adds these tags to the image file itself. So if I select Command I to get info in the Finder, the tags appear. This is not essential to a research workflow, but having the tags appear in Spotlight Search in the Mac OS could be good, though if I'm also putting those metadata in the file name itself, the tags aren't as necessary. I'll now merge the 3 image files, 006 to 008, into a single file. Unlike in Tropy, that yields a PDF. If I converted a single image file into a PDF in DevonThink, it would have preserved the full file name, but as you can see here, DevonThink has cut off the final digit. If I were working with a lot of images, having to add the last digit to each merged file would be annoying. You may also note that the PDF is pretty large, at 7.5 megabytes, which is coincidentally the same file size as the PDF I exported from Tropy a moment ago, although this version lacks the metadata and notes. Let's also take a look and see where DevonThink has placed my merged PDF. It's in a pretty inconspicuous subfolder on my hard drive, along with other PDFs that I've added to this DevonThink database. This is again different from if I'd simply converted a single image file into a PDF. In that case, the PDF would appear in the folder next to the original file. As we discussed in episode 6 of Research Craft, one big draw of DevonThink is the Pro version's integrated OCR, which allows you to make PDFs text searchable. I'll select that option for our new merged document, along with another in the same folder. If you were interested in OCRing all of your documents, you could set up a smart group that would OCR any image file that you put into the folder. As that processes, I'll compare DevonThink and Tropy in another way. I've always taken notes in DevonThink on an archive-by-archive basis, often chronologically or thematically. DevonThink does, however, allow you to link a text file to a specific PDF. To show this, I'll grab some notes from this item in Tropy and then paste them into the annotations field of the newly OCR'd PDF. You can see that a new annotations folder has appeared in this database. I now have a separate notes file associated with that PDF. To wrap up, let me take a look at my OCR'd PDFs. One reason I digitized this folder is that it addresses a Consejo Verbal de Guerra, a specific type of military tribunal. I'll search Verbal in DevonThink. It returns both of the PDFs that I just OCR'd. Let me expand one of them. The OCR missed the first instance of Verbal because of the text quality, but we see a couple of other hits. Tropy doesn't have OCR functionality. There are other paid options, like the full version of Adobe Acrobat, but let me propose a free alternative. Google Drive runs OCR and image files in the background after you've uploaded them, even if those images haven't been rotated or converted to PDF. I'll navigate to the relevant folder in Drive to search for Verbal to show you the results. Here we go. I can't search within the file, but I know the word is there. This trick has saved me tons of time. I've uploaded a couple thousand images to Drive, waited an hour or so, and done a search that pinpointed the document I needed. I've referred to this as backloading OCR. I'm not processing everything up front, which would take a lot of time, and I'm not then relying on an imperfect technology like OCR to read through those pages and pages of text. I'm instead processing after I've read things. I'm instead targeting my searches to locate specific information that I know is there. We've reached the end of this Tropy demo. The software has seen a lot of improvements since I last tried it in 2019. There's also a rich and active support forum online, and Tropy's developers continue to make improvements based on user feedback. I really like the interface and the opportunities for structuring metadata, which lend themselves to practices I developed a long time ago. Thanks for watching this episode of Research Craft. I hope you'll check out the full episode on Tropy. The episode description below also lists other Tropy resources that Jessica Mack has produced. Please subscribe to this channel so you get notified about new episodes. ResearchCraft is also now on Twitter at research_craft. You can find me at RACarl, where I often tweet research tips that don't make it into these episodes.